I have such immediate regrets wearing a fluffy jumper. I'm absolutely boiling already. Oh, I'm just debating whether to get changed. I don't think I can be bothered. Hi, how are you? How are you doing? I hope you're well. Welcome if you're new, welcome back. If you're not, thanks for sticking around. Today we are going to do my April wrap up and also a sneaky March wrap up because I never did one. I thought we would just combine the 2 months because honestly, March was not the best reading month. April, I think April might have been the best reading month I've ever had, ever. I have 5 books that are 4.5 stars or above. I had the best time in April. I've also made some stats for you guys because I don't know about you guys, but I'm nerdy as hell and I love seeing people's stats. So we'll start with March, then we'll go through every book I read in March, and then we will do April. So in March, I read 6 books, or more specifically 5 books and 1 play, which isn't brilliant. As I said, I think March was a really busy month for me. I literally can't even remember if that's true now. We're gonna say it is. But as I said, April we kind of pull it back, so March we read 5 books and a play. So we read 2 literary fictions, 2 thriller mysteries, 1 dystopia, and 1 play. I read 4 out of 8 of my TBR, so 50% success rate. As I say, we did better in April. 50% is alright. The books I didn't read were Red Rising, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Song for Dark Times, and Secretly Yours. I read a total of 2,085 pages, which averages about 67 pages a day, which I feel like sounds like a lot, but I've realised that I think I'm like a binge reader. Like I won't read for a few days and then I'll read like loads. So it kind of like, I definitely don't read 67 pages a day. Anywho, so let's go through the books I read. So starting off very strong. I finally read a Sally Rooney book and boy did I start well. I read Conversations with Friends and I loved this. I read this in a 24-hour readathon, which you can go check out if you haven't seen already, and I fangirled hard. I absolutely adored this. This is not remotely what I thought it was. For one thing, I thought this was a romance. It's not. It's about a relationship, kind of. It's about a few relationships. It's not romantic. It's not cute. It is like gritty and tense and like morally grey, and I ate it up because if you know me, if you've been here before, you know that's my favourite thing in the world. This follows Frances. She is 21 and she is in like a poetry duo with Bobby, who is her ex-girlfriend and also best friend. So the 2 of them already have a kind of complicated relationship, but they've got like a friendship going. And then the 2 of them make friends with a married couple, and then everything just gets even more complicated. Writing where it's like not tons happens in this book. There's a plot, like there definitely is, but it's not like there's epic war battles and like a quest. Like it's a gentle sort of slice of life story, but also thoroughly engaging throughout. I mean, I like slice of life books, but I think even if you don't, this is still so engaging. This feels like those innermost thoughts that you have that you don't share with anybody, and then it's written on a page and reflected back to you, and it's just gorgeous. I then read Hunger, which is the 2nd book in the Gun series. I feel like I've said this 17,000 times, so I'm going to say it really quickly, but I am doing a reread of this series because I've read every book except the last one when I was a child and I want to know how it ends. So obviously, like, I've read this book before, I already knew what was happening, but I love these characters. This feels like a comfort world for me because it's like one of the series that like got me into reading. This is it is YA, but like it doesn't read YA to me anyway. But it's a series about a world in which all the adults disappear and these kids are like trapped in a dome and they kind of start developing like magical powers. And it's very like Lord of the Flies, like everything kind of goes chaotic, and there's a little bit of everything in here. There's like horror elements, there's romance elements, there's like fantasy and dystopia. I seriously think like almost anybody will enjoy this series because there really is a bit of everything. And this follows like the widest cast of characters. Like this follows probably 30 or 40 people and you like jump back and forth between those perspectives, which you might be like, oh, that sounds really overwhelming and like too many people, but it doesn't read like that because you get to know everyone so well. Like I think Michael Grant does such an amazing job of, even though he has such a massive cast, I feel like everybody is fleshed out and you get to know everyone. And like some of them are horrible, some of them are like amazing, most of them are somewhere in the middle, which is gorgeous. This is such a comfort series for me and I'm just happy to be back in and amongst it. And I finally got round to The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And somebody tell me why I was convinced that this was published like decades ago. I was convinced this was a book written in like the 1900s. It was literally written 2020. It was written 4 years ago. Also, how was 2020 4 years ago? That's disturbing. Yeah, I very much had it in my head that this was like a classic, and maybe it's like a modern classic, but it was written 4 years ago. This follows a girl called why did I pronounce girls so badly? This follows a girl called Nora who she has decided to take her own life, and she ends up in this sort of purgatory sort of thing, and it's basically a library, and it's kind of like a magical realism, and she meets this librarian who she used to know when she was a child, and the librarian basically takes her to all these different worlds, and she'll like pick a book, and then inside that book she'll like discover a life, and it's all to do with like the things she thought she regretted. So in each life she'll explore her regrets. So like, oh, I wish I had moved away with my best friend and gone to Australia. So she'll say, oh, what was that life like when I was in Australia? And some of the lives are great and some of them are not great. And it's kind of like a philosophical book about life and death. I feel like it's not necessarily like a book you will binge. I mean, I did read it in one sitting because I read it for a 24-hour readathon. But it's very like gentle. It's like a I was going to say cozy, but it's not cozy. Well, in some ways it is wholesome and heartwarming, but it's also sad. It's not the kind of book you're going to binge in terms of it's similar to Conversations with Friends. It's not like loads of plot happening. It's very like you're sort of just floating around with Nora, like going through these different lives. I remember this book just like the day I finished it, I went to bed that night and it just kind of made me like question my life. So I feel like if you like a book that makes you feel very existential, then this is probably one for you. I then read 1 Minute by Simon Stephens, which was a play. It's a relatively short play. It was 71 pages, so that's probably like a one-act play. And it followed the disappearance of a girl who was living in London, and it's basically sort of the aftermath of that play. But yeah, I've read a few of Simon Stephens' plays in the past, and I always enjoy them. He has the most natural writing style. I feel like he was one of the first playwrights that I like got properly into when I was in school. If anyone is a writer or anything in that stretch and wants to like study naturalistic dialogue, then this is your man. The dialogue, like the back and forth between the characters, just feels like so real, and it makes all of the situations and like the characters so much more raw and like emotional. The next two books are from my blind dates with books. So if you haven't seen that video and you don't want it spoiled, if you want to go and like see me unwrapping the books and seeing what I got, then I guess pause this video, go and watch that, and then come back and watch this video. Don't leave. That is your warning, I'm now going to spoil them. So I think the first book that I got in that video was Richard Osman's The Bullet That Missed. Now, if you've seen this video, you'll understand my dilemma with this book because I obviously unwrapped this as like a mystery book. I'm gonna like just read whatever's in it, and I had no idea like what book I was getting. I just bought it from a secondhand bookstore. This is the third book in a series and I have read the first book and I did think, oh, these are pretty standalone. And they absolutely are. But I do feel like I still wish I'd read them in order because this was its own mystery. Like, there was nothing that I like didn't understand, but I could tell that there was so much stuff that I missed. For one thing, there were two characters who were like in a relationship and I was like, oh, when did that happen? Oh, I just took the dust jacket off and it's got a little fox on the front. That's so cute. I guess I never took the dust jacket off. I feel like I do normally. That was actually really cute. I want to know what's on the other one now. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. Literally, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So there were two characters who got together and I was like, I don't know where that came from. And then there was this character who was in prison who I assume that character was kind of the person who did whatever the crime was in the second book, because they kept going back to see this person and I just felt like I was missing something, which I assume is from the second book. I don't know that for a fact, but what's my point? Basically, these are standalones and you absolutely can read them as that. I just kind of wish I had not. I kind of wish I'd read them in order. But I did still like this. It's like a cozy, sorry, I've literally not explained even remotely what this book is about. It's a cozy mystery. It's about these 4 people living in a retirement home, and they've set up a thing called the Thursday Murder Club. They solve mysteries, and then the mysteries kind of start happening in their own lives. And the characters are all super lovable. I think Richard Osman does such a stunning job of making these like 70, 80-year-olds these completely full fleshed out characters, because I think often in books when you read about older people, they can be quite like two-dimensional and just like their only characteristic is being old, and that's not this at all. I mean, obviously the story is completely centered on them, so they would have to be fleshed out, but I just think he's done it in such a stunning way. The first one had loads of conversations about like aging and like losing like friends and partners as you get older, so that one was like the super emotional one. This one for me was just a bit more cozy and like fun and whimsical. Anyway, the other book I read in that video was Running Scared. I feel like I don't have the best memory of what this was about. The main thing I remember about this was the crime family were called the Harveys, and I'm a Harvey, and they kept saying things like how dreadful the Harveys were and what like terrible people and how you should like avoid the Harveys, and I thought that was funny. I don't remember the ins and outs of this plot. I remember it was like about this girl called Lexi, and I think it's set in Manchester, and I know she had like a rough upbringing and then she'd moved away, and something like, it's kind of a spoiler so I won't say, it's like a minor spoiler, but something happened basically, so she moved away, and then she kind of comes back I think 10 years later, and it's kind of like the aftermath of all that. It's not really a mystery, like there's nothing to be like solved, but it's kind of just like following this sort of like crime. I mean, she's not in the crime family, but she kind of has like connections. But I remember it read super quickly. I don't remember like the ins and outs of everything, but I remember I sped through this. I think I read it in a day or two. And I do also remember there was some very, very dark content in here, so I would also definitely check your trigger warnings. Alright, I feel like that took us a year and a half for some reason, but that was March. So now we're moving on to April, which, as I said, April was one of my favourite reading months ever. I read such good books in April. So my stats before we get into too much, I read 8 books. I read 3 literary fiction, 2 thriller, 1 dark academia, 1 romance and 1 dystopia. So both months we've read most literary fiction, which I feel like checks out, but we've got a nice range this month. I do try and read a range of genres wherever possible. I'm someone who I don't like reading genres back to back, so generally speaking, unless it's literary fiction, because I feel like those are quite a range, but if it's something like romance or fantasy or something like that, I don't normally like to read them back to back unless I'm doing it for a video. So we read 3,182 pages, which averages out to 106 pages a day, which again, as I said earlier, I don't think I was reading 106 pages a day. I think I was reading more like binge reading. I read 6 out of 10 of my TBR. I deliberately picked a bigger TBR for this month because I had my authors choose my reads video, so I wanted more options for that. So I always knew I wasn't going to read all 10 books, but reading 6 out of 10, 60%, I think we'll take that. So the books I didn't get to on my TBR, How I Ascended the Sea, which I'm so sad that I haven't got to yet. I need to make that a priority. Flawless, A Bright Ray of Darkness, and One of Us is Lying. Actually, all of these books are featured in videos, so if you want any more like in-depth thoughts, then go check out the videos. But the first video that we did this month that we read from was reading books that give Saltburn vibes. I watched the film Saltburn this month and I loved it. And I kind of knew I was gonna love it because it was just like up my alley, the kind of like unhinged storylines, like weird, wacky characters, complex relationships. I knew it was going to be up my alley. So when I finished it, I kind of was like, I want to continue these vibes. So I basically, in that video, searched out books that gave Saltburn vibes, according to the internet. And I'm not going to lie, the internet did not disappoint because I read some bangers. So first up, we read Bunny by Mona Awad. This follows Samantha. She is in university. She's doing like a writing course, and there are like, I think there's like 6 of them doing this writing course, and all of the other girls on the writing course are in a like cult. They're called the Bunnies, and they're like very hyper, like obsessed with each other, and she's the only one of the like 6 of them not in it, and she's always like, I hate the bunnies, they're ridiculous, I want nothing to do with them. And then they invite her to a bunny party and she's like, absolutely, I will come. I adored this. It is insane. It is one of the most insane things I've ever read. It felt like a fever dream. There are big parts of this book that make no sense, but like in an intentional way. There's a whole section of this book where you can't even distinguish who the characters are. It's like every single bunny is referring to the other bunnies as bunny, but we don't know who is who. It's absolutely insane. And I think when I started this, I thought it was gonna start normal and get a little bit weirder and then be weird by the end. No, this was weird by like 50 pages in, but I adored it. It was absolutely insane. But if you like unhinged books, I was gonna say morally grey, but honestly just like awful characters. But like, no, not all of them are awful, but just like completely messed up, unhinged characters and storylines. If you like that kind of thing, you will love this. If you don't, fair enough. But that is my jam. And I had the best time. Then also in that video, we read If We Were Villains, and guess what? Another banger. This was completely different to Bunny. This was dark academia, and it was basically a sort of thriller mystery set in a drama school, which was one of the main reasons I think I felt immediately connected to it. I obviously went to drama school. I like felt very connected to the story. It follows Oliver just as he gets out of prison for having done a murder 10 years ago. And then he basically says quite early on, like, I'm going to tell you the truth of what happened. And then it flashes back 10 years to him and his group of friends in this drama school. And one of them dies. You don't know who for quite a long time, but it basically follows these, I can't remember how many of them there were, around 8, I think. I can't remember, we're going to call it 8, but these 8 people, you know one of them's been murdered, you know one of them is the murderer, and you don't totally know if it's Oliver or if it's someone else or who died or like... So it's like a fun, dark thriller, but then it also has these like real literary fiction themes, particularly within like the complicated relationships between the 8 of them. And it was absolutely stunning. And if you love Shakespeare, you will love this. It is embedded with Shakespeare, and it's done with such like love and passion from the author. You can tell ML Rio is like not only incredibly intelligent, but like very passionate and like in love with Shakespeare. I've seen some people be like, oh, I don't want to read it because of the Shakespeare, and I will say, I think if Shakespeare isn't your thing, you can still very much enjoy this. Like, there is a lot of Shakespeare in it. Often the characters will kind of speak in Shakespearean, but like, it's not a lot. It's like a few lines every now and again. This is just such a unique book. It's also set out like a play, so at the start of each act we have prologues, and then the scenes are like the chapters. So there aren't chapter breaks, which that made me nervous, because I was like, I love a short chapter. Not only doesn't really have chapters, but the scenes are quite long, which made me nervous. And then I got so obsessed with it that I didn't even notice. And the ending threw me down a Reddit rabbit hole, because I was like, I thought I understood it, and then I was like, no, I don't, and I had to Google it, and I kind of got a grasp on it, but let's just say it's been playing on my mind. But adored this, thought it was stunning, would absolutely recommend. I then filmed one of the videos that I am probably most proud of, just because I loved the concept and it turned out like really well in terms of like the response. I filmed a video that, if you haven't seen, please go check it out after this video. I filmed a video where I DM'd authors and asked them to pick my reads. And I'm not going to spoil the authors in this, so if you want to see which authors picked the next few books for me, go check it out. But I will say, I was blown away by who I got. Like, I aimed high, but I wasn't really expecting to get responses. And I mean, trigger warning for hard fangirling in that video. But I won't spoil it in this video, but I will talk through the books that those authors picked. So first up, we read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. It was my first Alice Feeney book. It moved super quickly. It's quite short, I think. Yeah, it's only just over 300 pages. And it's sort of like a domestic thriller about this couple who go to Scotland, I think. Yeah, the Scottish Highlands. On like it's meant to be like a romantic getaway, but they kind of, I don't want to say they hate each other, but they're having issues. Basically, from the beginning, you follow both of their perspectives. They keep talking about like, only one of us is coming back, but for like different reasons. I don't know, but her writing style was stunning to me. I ate it up. And the plot twist in this, stunning, stunning. Thriller mysteries aren't always my favourite because I feel like the twist has to really like get me for me to enjoy this. But not only was the twist in this incredible, this was engaging from page one. Yeah, as I say, my first Alice Feeney book, I own Daisy Darker. I don't think I own any others. But I recently found out that Daisy Darker is a And Then There Were None retelling, and I love that story. It's moved up, it's bumped up to the top of my TBR, having read this. Then we read Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, and this is another one that I adored. This follows Queenie, and she basically is on a break from her boyfriend. I think he was called Tom, and that was kind of his decision. So she's feeling quite like overwhelmed about that. So she's basically trying to fill this void of Tom, because also she keeps messaging him being like, how long is this break gonna last? And he's basically not giving her any answers. And she can kind of tell something's off. So she's trying to kind of fill that void by dating other men, and generally speaking those other men are very horrible to her, but she's also like, she's not doing well at work, like she's dealing with like all of these things with friendships, and it's just so real and raw. And it's also really funny, like the writing style was very funny, and like it is kind of a comic book, but it also deals with like much darker topics as well. It talks a lot about racism, it talks about microaggressions and fetishizing black women, and it has super important conversations in here, and it's also incredibly engaging and funny at the same time. And this also had such a wonderful cast of characters, and even the like much smaller characters were so fleshed out. Like all of her friends in this book, she has like probably 3 like main friends who we follow, and all 3 of those friends, even though they're slightly smaller parts of the book, are so fleshed out. And I just love when you get like a supporting cast who are also, they feel just as real and fleshed out as the main character. Anyway, I adored this, and I flew through it, and I don't think I own any of her other books, but I would love to read some more. I think she has a book called People Person. Is that what it's called? Well, I can't check because is anybody else's Goodreads glitching out at the moment? Like just straight up not working. Like every time I go on it, like my currently reads aren't there. I can't look at my want to read. I can't look at my like previously read. Like it just doesn't work at the moment. Yeah, so she has another book called People Person, which I don't really know what it's about, but I've seen the cover of a few times, and I want to get to that at some point, because I think this was her debut as well. Have I made that up? Yeah, it was a debut, which, insane debut. And then last, but very much not least, in that video, I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I said in that video that I felt like I needed more time to process my feelings on this book before I could talk about it properly. This book did something to me. It is stunning, but I just feel like I still haven't processed any of my feelings. This follows Vanessa. She is a 15-year-old high school student, and she basically gets groomed by her teacher. So it's obviously an incredibly dark, sad read, but one of my favourite things that this book did was how it dealt with the complexities of trauma. I felt like it didn't sugarcoat anything. It didn't shy away from any parts of the story and the relationship between Vanessa and the teacher. It is disturbing and sad, but it's also deeply important and intelligent. This book is in conversation with the book Lolita, but it's basically Lolita reversed, so you're getting her perspective. I feel like Kate Elizabeth Russell just did such an incredible job of making this character whole and flawed and just so real. And you follow 2 timelines. You basically follow the timeline when she's 15 and she's meeting this teacher, and then you follow her, like, I can't remember how many years later, but like a lot of years later when she's an adult, and it's like the ways in which she's affected by it and how she still kind of has this connection to him. And it's messy and dark, and it's really difficult to read, and I would say check the trigger warnings very closely for a book like this and kind of go into it when you feel like you can. But if you do feel like this is a book you could read, I highly recommend it, because I think it's beautiful, and it was also just incredibly engaging, and I think the writing style was stunning. But this is just a book that has stuck with me in a way that a lot of books don't. Like, I feel like this is a book I will never get out of my head. And that is very special. Sorry, this is actually like the longest video ever. I have already been talking for 40 minutes. I'm starting to lose my voice, which is wonderful. But we have 3 more books left and then we're done, and then you can go about your day. The final video we did was finishing series. I'm gonna kind of speed run these 3 because I just put this video out and I only just finished filming it. So like, I feel like I've already spoken about them a lot. So if you want a lot more in-depth thoughts and feelings about these books, then go check out that video. But the first book we read in that video was The Family Remains by Lisa Jewell. We finished The Family Upstairs duology. This is 2 books. They are like thriller mysteries, but with a real like literary fiction depth to them. And they follow this family who kind of basically fall into a cult. They are stunning, sad, you absolutely need to check the trigger warnings, but I eat up Lisa Jewell's writing. I love it every time and I loved it again. There aren't many thriller books that like warrant a second book, and this 1000% did because of how dark and complex everything was. And you get obviously the like thriller situation of like, oh, what happened in this house and why did these characters fall into these situations? But you also get all of the complexities of like everything that happened afterwards, particularly in this book, because you're less so following that initial storyline of like why they fell into this cult and like everything that happened in that. That's more in the first book. This one is more of the aftermath and like the long-term effects that's had on the characters. But it was stunning and I adored it. Then we read Unravel Me, which is a dystopia fantasy, somewhere in that realm. This is the second book in the Shatter Me series. It is a YA romance. The first one was pretty much just a romance, I would say. It was very, very heavy on the romance with like a dystopian setting. And then this one kind of, it had a lot more of like a mix between the like world building and the plot and the romance, which I really enjoyed because I am a dystopia girly. I love a dystopia. So it was nice to see a bit more of that in this book. Definitely RYA, they do read younger, but the writing style is so quick. Like, this is one of the books I've read the quickest like ever, this series. There's just something about it, I just fly through it. I find her writing style so easy. Also, if you love the kind of like insta love, like fell hard, fell fast, big declarations of love, that kind of thing, you will eat particularly this book up, this second book. It's very much that. It's also like love triangles. I think if those are the kind of tropes that you enjoy, this is a great one. And then last but not least, we have Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. I literally just finished this, was this yesterday? So I feel like I've spoken about this book so much. Obviously you guys haven't heard about it in this video, but you know, go watch that video if you want full thoughts. But this is the follow-up to Magnolia Parks. This one is like incredibly different, not in like tone of writing, but in, I guess, content. Like the Magnolia Parks is very like socialites and like they're like rich and like posh and they're very, what's the word, unrelatable and not particularly nice people, which not a problem to me. I don't mind unrelatable, unlikable characters, but Daisy Hates, don't get me wrong, it's not relatable. They're basically a crime family, so they're like the brother in this book like steals art and they're like going on like heists and there are like shootings. It's not relatable, but it felt somehow more down to earth than Magnolia Parks. I loved Daisy. I thought Daisy was so cool. I also loved Julian. The way everyone spoke about Julian though, I thought he was going to be in this more. Like everyone speaks about Julian like they're in love with him, and like same, I loved him, but like he wasn't in it that much. I don't know, maybe he's in the rest of the series later. I like this series. I think her writing style is like super engaging. And I think you just kind of have to go into them knowing they're romance dramas. Like they're not super like cutesy romances. They're like darker and grittier and more toxic. There you have it. I have been talking for a year and a half, so I'm not going to do a long outro, but thank you very, very much for watching. If you want any more thoughts on any of these books, go watch the videos. I feel like we've done some fun videos in this last month. I've had a jolly old time. It's also a fun little, not announcement, literally not an announcement at all. Up until this point I've been doing one video a week. My plan going forward is to do 6 videos a month. possibly more, but we're going to do 6 for now to check I can definitely keep up with that workload. So we should be having monthly wrap-ups every month. We should be having extra videos. So hopefully you guys will get more content, which I'm hoping you'll enjoy, and I get to make more content, which I definitely do enjoy. So, you know, stick around if you want to see that, and if you could subscribe, that would mean the world to me. Also, if you could just like the video, it makes such a difference. But I hope you have a lovely, beautiful rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye!